Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue Studios, I'm Justin Brady. There aren't multiple studios, by the way. It's just one. The old habits die hard from my WHO radio days, I guess. From the Jethro's Barbecue Studio, I'm Justin Brady. Have you seen the DART buses driving by? Yes, maybe no. Just looking at the data, most of you aren't taking the DART buses. So we're going to dig into why that is. Do we need to do something about that locally? Should we do something about it? What is being done about that? Lots of DART questions today, and who better to bring in the studio than the CEO of DART, Amanda Wanke. Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Quick reminder before we get started, everybody, you know, food prices are a little high right now. I don't think that's much of a shock. And so here's this cool thing. Jethro's is doing this cool thing for all of you. And that is, seriously, it's only for iowapodcast.com people and listeners of the show. That's it. If you go to the bottom of our page at iowapodcast.com and you click the little call to action button, you can get a $30 gift card from Jethro's for free if you buy a $100 gift card. That's kind of cool. So anyway, iowapodcast.com, scroll to the bottom, click it to get that deal. Amanda, thanks so much for coming in here. The last year, I believe, we had Mayor Bozen in the I know she was in here. I did the interview. She was in the studio talking about the fact that utilization was a bit down. And she was, at the time, I think probably working with you on strategies to change that, to shore up DART, looking to the future. Has that changed at all since then?
Great question. And it is a work in progress. Utilization does continue to go up, though, at a pretty fast clip. Actually, DART, from a transit system perspective, has grown and recovered from the pandemic faster than many agencies across the country. We're at about 80 to 85% of our pre-pandemic ridership. We have more than 12,000 times a day someone gets on a bus. One of the questions I always get is, how many people is that, right? Without a tracker on every person, I don't know if it's one person 12,000 times or 12,000 people one time, but I would guess it's somewhere about half of that because most people are taking a trip somewhere and then back again. So ridership is on its way up, and there's a lot we're doing to focus on the future and things we need to change. And yes, Mayor Bozen is now our chair, and so I really enjoy working with her, and I know this is something she's passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not too pre-pandemic levels yet, but what you're saying is when you compare similar cities, similar organizations across the country, we're faring better, and you're judging better in this case by utilization, which is great for Des Moines, but it's not quite to pre-pandemic levels yet. Why do you think that is? I know you have like data about all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, how people have traveled and how people are working has really changed. And that is part of the reason that we are going through this process called Reimagine DART, is because a lot has changed in our community. DART was created in 2006 to serve as the regional public transit entity because we know people don't travel and just stop at the borders of one town. We need to plan for our whole region. And the system, in the design of the system and our routes, while we've made lots of changes and improvements and added and changed, we haven't taken a step back and looked at the system as a whole since it was initially developed in 2006. And so we believe now is the right time to do that, in part because of those post-pandemic changes in how people are riding. We used to have a lot of riders on our express routes, which were during the typical peak commute routes for people coming from the suburbs to downtown. Well, the white-collar worker has completely changed how, when, and where they're working. So our express route ridership is not recovering at the same rate as our other routes, and I don't expect it to. I think we need to make changes in that. In addition, we've seen increases in midday and weekend travel, and so we know that people who are using DART are often our frontline workers at grocery stores, at schools, at restaurants, and those shifts aren't always during 9 to 5 hours. And so we know the travel patterns, who's traveling, when and where they're going have changed, and we need to change with it.
And that was my next question, which is give us an idea of rider breakdown. Like, who are these people? Who's riding? And I guess it would be worth going into who's not riding. And the reason I asked that is because, Dan Houston, we've actually, the CEO of Principal, we've reached out to the Principal team. We'll see if we can get him in there. They are doing the push for back to office. So does DART look at that and say, that could really help with the utilization issue?
I'm not going to put all my eggs in the people coming back to the office.
But I imagine that represents a trend, though.
Certainly.
If someone like Dan and his team are pushing for back to the office, which everybody knows my bias on this. I'm a huge believer in office, and there's reasons behind that. But is that something you're looking to with fingers crossed, or you're saying we're not planning on it?
It helps, and there's reasons I want a thriving downtown, and I think having people in offices downtown is going to help our downtown thrive. But as a whole, getting back to the original question you had of who rides, I think that'll show you why I'm not so worried about it. So just about 92% of our riders are in households that have an annual income of $50,000 a year or less.
Got it.
And so when you're looking at who rides our buses, it is often people who are challenged financially or are working those frontline beginning wage jobs. And we know that isn't the executive working at Principal. Now, we do have some people, about 4% of our riders make $75,000 or more. And we can talk about how we attract and make service good for those riders. But one of the things we know we need to focus on is we can't be everything to everybody. So as we have talked a lot about with our commission and as we go through Reimagine DART, there is a lot of focus on ensuring that our people who really need public transit and don't have another option have the best possible service.
So what do you expect? I know you're doing the big public listening thing.
Yeah.
And you do have, as you said, you do have some unique challenges, right? And maybe we can get into these later, but Des Moines is an odd city. And I don't say that as an insult or a positive thing. It's neither. But, you go to some bigger cities and they're extremely compressed and extremely dense. And public transit can just by saturation handle a lot more people, or it serves a lot more people, and they're more compressed. Like Manhattan is like, well, we have a big public transit system. I'm like, yeah, and also I can walk across your whole city in probably 20, 30 minutes or just the downtown Manhattan area. Very, very different economics there. So you have the density issue, and then you also have parking in downtown Des Moines, which is like, and the whole metro, which is like free or super cheap everywhere. You can throw a stone any direction and hit like 2 parking spaces.
Yeah. So
you have some challenges. What do you expect to see with the public feedback? Like, what are you looking for?
Sure. And those challenges are reality, right? There's a lot of things I love about Des Moines, Iowa. And I love that we have easy commute times. Again, isn't something that pushes people to use transit in the way it would in a much bigger city. And in addition, how we have expanded as a region doesn't make it easy to serve from a transit perspective, because our biggest costs are based on the hours and miles we travel. Our biggest cost is first the person, the driver in the seat, and then it's the fuel, the parts, the equipment. And those things all cost more the further you have to go. And so that is one of the reasons, again, we need to look at and talk about what is most important to us as a region. And this first phase of Reimagine DART is all about 2 contrasting concepts and having our community have some conversation around that. One being a ridership concept where our goal is get as many riders as possible. And that would focus higher frequency routes on our corridors where we have the most density and the most people. You can guess the challenge with that is we're going to leave parts of our community untouched without access to service. The coverage model aims at having more coverage throughout the region, but you're using the same number of resources. So you're essentially spreading those resources out. So you might use more micro transit. You might have routes with less frequency. There's a variety of ways we could do that. We can't be everything. And so what do we want as a community? It doesn't have to be all one or all another. Because we also know what's best for downtown Des Moines might be different than what's good for Altoona. And so there's ways we can look at and blend approaches. And I can pretty much guarantee the commission will not choose just one or the other. It'll be some blended approach. But that's where the public and rider feedback is really important, is that we need to choose what we're trying to be and what problem we're trying to solve.
Like one of the challenges I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you'll get is time. Like the time, because, you know, and again, dumb comparisons. So don't judge me on this, everybody. I don't want to hear angry emails from anybody. But when we were in Paris, see, everyone's already like, oh my gosh, you idiot. Who's running this show? Well, I'm running the show. Really, it was to try to drive anywhere in that city would have been awful. Absolutely awful. I mean, we did take a few Ubers and it's terrible. Like an hour just to go like a foot. But the subway system, we could get anywhere in the entire metro. Paris is a huge city for those that haven't been there. I was stunned at how massive it is just in size. You can get anywhere faster in Paris on the subway system than you can in Des Moines in a car. And so with Des Moines, though, some individuals, there's a friend of mine that believes in public transit, but she said, I can't take it because, and she had a free pass. She worked for Des Moines Public Schools. And she's like, I can't take it because it's 7 minutes to get to school by car. But via DART, she would go from, she was in Des Moines, in Des Moines proper. She would go to the hub and then back. And I think it was something like 45 minutes or something. So is this one of the things that DART is trying to get a handle of, cutting those times down?
So two components to the answer. I want to come back to something you asked at the beginning about who our riders are, because I think an important component that I didn't mention earlier is that approximately 60% of our riders do not have a driver's license.
60%?
60%. Wow. And about 60%, right? And we're not asking the question together, don't have a working car in their household. So when we look at those numbers, and it surprises me, right? I'm also continue to learn that there's so many reasons people don't have a license or don't have a car. Certainly finances being one of the big ones, everything gasoline, that goes with that.
Finance, there's a long
but you
list.
Look at certain disabilities. You are unable to drive. I was just talking to a rider who never thought he'd have to use public transit. Ended up with some medical issues and now relies on it because it is his only option. And we look at people who are new to our country, who are learning the language. The driving isn't the first thing they're going to do when they get here.
Also true.
As we look at people who are coming out of our prison system, there's a variety of reasons. And so public transit plays a really big role for them. In addition, on the travel times are a challenge. And one of the reasons, a couple of reasons for that, you mentioned how we spread out, right? So there's that, how we spread out. But in addition, as we look at how we've invested in public transit in our community, if we look at how our region grew since 2009, our region has grown 29%. The hours of service we have on the road have grown by 1%. And so we have not kept up with the growth in our region. And so while I would love to say, yep, I'm going to solve all those challenges and how long it can take to get somewhere, with limited resources, we have to make some trade-offs. And that's one of the things we are looking at. Now, there are some things we hope to be able to do to speed up routes, including increasing our timed transfers at DART Central Station and increasing how frequently people transfer and how often those buses come together at DART Central Station. We're looking at bus stop spacing. How many stops you stop at makes a difference in how fast you can go. So we are looking at things we can do to speed up the time. But if we have to get someone, to work in the Amazon facility in Bondurant and they happen to live in Valley Junction, it is pretty difficult to do that trip without a transfer. It's not possible right now to do that trip without a transfer. So we're going to try and make that transfer quicker. But there's a variety of reasons that make it take longer, and would love to solve it all. But again, I'm also trying to be realistic. And what we're trying to do is provide the best service we can with the resources we have. And because our investment hasn't grown along with our community, there's a big disconnect between what people want and what we're able to provide.
And I don't mean this in a bad way at all. It's just good economics is what you're kind of saying by the way, in a very polished way is, look, guys, there's some people we're targeting and some people where we're not for you. Sorry, but we're not for you and we probably won't be anytime soon. Is this kind of the very, very, very nice and kind way of what you're saying? Is this kind of what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't the fact that
your comms people are like,
we have had a lot of conversation, and I'm very thankful. We have some consultants who are experts in the transit field who have done this in small cities and big cities alike throughout the world. And so there are some things about transit that we know don't change no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. And, for example, geography is always a piece of the component. How far you have to go, where you need to go, that's a component of it. One thing we can do, and this is what I want to make sure I don't do, is place all of our riders in buckets. We used to call them a choice rider, someone who chooses to ride, versus what might be called a captive rider because they don't have another choice. It is easy to try and put people in those two buckets. And certainly when we have limited resources, we are going to focus more on certain audiences. Mm-hmm. But that said, we also know there are people in our community who want to use transit. We have a rider on our advisory committee. He and his wife intentionally have one car, and he's someone who works at Principal, and he very intentionally wants to ride the bus. We also know that the younger generation is getting their driver's licenses later in life. Some people don't want to drive. So I don't want to say it's an either or, but I also would say we can't, because there's on the spectrum, people fit in different ways and ride for different reasons. And good transit service can be good transit service for any type of rider. So as we look at a ridership model, more frequency is a key to getting more people to ride. And that's why that model has that. But we can't have, with the budget we currently have, 15-minute frequency that is getting everybody to the extreme edges of our community. And so, again, we have to look at those trade-offs. But yes, we also have to make decisions. And I know myself, and I've had a lot of friends say, love to be able to take the bus to more concerts. I'd love to be able to go downtown at night, be able to have a safe ride home, do more of that. Would absolutely love that. But getting people to work, school, and medical appointments are our top priorities. If I can find additional resources to also lean into entertainment and nightlife and those things, that would be great. But we do often have to focus and prioritize.
So this is interesting because if you think of DART in an economic lens, a strict economic lens, you think of things like, well, I mean, if people want buses for concerts, they want to be dropped off at the door, you do a park and ride, you park at a high school somewhere, and that's more revenue for you. Why wouldn't you do it? But the economics of DART aren't that simple because I believe the city, so this is where it gets a little confusing. The city council has approved a plan to look at a 5 to 7% increase, I believe, would come out of utility taxes in the Des Moines metro area to subsidize DART. DART, as it stands right now, is not profitable. It probably won't be in the near future, correct?
Yeah, I think that comes back to what you talked about the economics of it from the very beginning. And that's one thing we have to acknowledge and know about public transit, what we're trying to achieve with it. There is no public transit agency I know of in the United States that is profitable. That is why it's public, is because we need that investment, just like we invest in our roads and we invest in sewers and we invest in water. There's a component of it that is infrastructure that is there to support our economic development, that is there to support people who don't have other options. It's there to support what we want our region to be. And that is why it does rely on taxpayer funding. Mm-hmm. So I will never be a profit business. I am looking at, and we continue to look at, what are the tools we could use to bring in other revenue sources? What are different things we could look at? But I have to accept the bottom line is there's reason public transit is public transit. And with that, there's a lot of different funding tools, and in some ways, there's a lot of different funding tools. But really, for our operations, there's one primary funding tool, and that is property taxes.
Right.
And that is capped by the legislature at 95 cents on the thousand. And the city of Des Moines reached that cap several years ago. So they've been contributing from their general fund. The one thing we have been doing for years is asking the legislature to give us different funding stream, something that isn't tied to where someone lives and their property taxes, but that we believe there's other options out there. The one tool they've given us thus far has been given to the city of Des Moines because they were originally the only city that had hit the cap, and they were given the ability to raise their franchise fee from 5% to 7.5%. And that money either needs to go to transit or to lowering property taxes. So that is a tool that was given to the city of Des Moines. Long term, we do believe that there's other, better, different ways to fund public transit. There's still going to be public funding. All those ideas are still public funding, but we do know that we have other cities who are hitting that cap as well. And we know that there's other agencies throughout the state that are also hitting that 95-cent cap. And so we do believe and hope that long term the legislature will help with additional funding sources. But we know right now, reality is we're in a world that is very low tax focused. And I don't see us getting additional funding streams other than what has been given to the city of Des Moines anytime soon. Certainly, I'm dedicated to being creative, looking at other ways of doing things, looking at some other service models, offering the best service with what we have. But public transit at its nature is public for all the public good it does.
And I think it's important to draw that distinction because sometimes in the discussion of public transit, and there are both sides of this issue. There are great reasons for both sides of this issue, but sometimes it comes down to, well, it's not profitable, it's losing money, therefore it needs to be cut. And it's helpful to hear you say, it's not going to. That's not the point. The point is this is a public service for the city. That's the thing y'all can debate. Should we have public services like this or should we not? If we do believe in it, let's fund it. If we don't, sure, let's kill it off. Right? That's where the actual discussion is centered, not trying to make it profitable. Obviously, you want to minimize loss. You don't want to, you do have budgets like anybody else. 10%, or is it maybe 12? It might be somewhere in there. 10 to 15% of your budget is actually from fares, right? So
fares
the actual fares being paid are the smallest part.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is very typical. Again, we look across and work with other transit agencies to learn from each other. That is very typical in the transit industries, is that fares and contracts make up about 10 to 15% of overall budget for most public transit agencies. Some are less, some are more, and there's a variety of factors that go into it. But as we've looked at Reimagine DART, one of the things we are looking at that will be a next step in all of this is looking at our fares, our bus fare, how much we charge people to ride. I can tell you that I know we're pretty average with what we see around the country. $1.50, we're at $1.75 on fixed route. $1.50 to $2.50, $1.50 to $2 is pretty typical for transit, but we need to take a step back and really look at that. We also know we have quite a few people who can't afford the bus fare. And it is something that keeps them from being able to use the bus. We do have some programs in place for people that can't afford their fare. If someone is on food assistance or housing assistance or work assistance, they can bring the proof of that into DART and we will give them information to be able to access a half fare pass. The whole question of how to charge, how much to charge, all of that is definitely a challenge, but it's also one of the components we're looking at and trying to balance, making sure it's affordable for the people who can't pay the full fare, and also making sure we're looking out for the taxpayer and thinking about collecting as much as we can.
You mentioned looking at other ways to fund it in the next few years. What other ways are on the table?
Well, there's no silver bullet. If there was, we wouldn't be sitting here. We would have done it by now. And but some of the things we consider, and again, not saying we're going to do these, just continuing to look at them.
Yeah.
There's everything from again, fares, especially if we look at our on-demand services. Our on-demand services are more door-to-door type services. And we have a pilot that's been running in Ankeny for a few years, and it's very successful, very utilized well. I've had a lot of people say, well, if someone can, and that fare is $3.50. Maybe we should try and figure out how to charge more for those door-to-door services. Some people will hear me say that and say, no way, I can't afford that, right? But looking at the fares is a component we need to look at. Looking at the different services we provide and how we deliver that. We also have, a lot of people don't know, a van pool service that we call Caravan. And that aims to connect people in the Des Moines area along with jobs and people outside of Des Moines. And so it used to be, again, talking about how people used to commute, used to be a lot of rural folks coming into downtown Des Moines. Now we're seeing more and more that people from Des Moines and the surrounding suburbs are going to manufacturing plants in Newton or Pella.
Really?
Other areas. Yes.
That's quite a drive.
Yes. And there's been some things that have really changed with that program. Again, looking at that model, one of the employers actually has a waiting list of 30 to 40 people who want to participate in a van, but no one wants to drive. Van pool is based on a volunteer driver model. Well, we're looking at, what would we have to charge if we tried a paid driver model? What are some of the other tools and services we could deliver? I have people ask me, they say, can we donate to DART? We currently work with the Community Foundation if someone's interested. We don't have...
You can donate to the Community Foundation. It'll make its way to you.
Yes, and it can make our way to us. But again, continuing to explore, is there more we should do on that front? Is there more, something different? We have a lot of business partners. Is there anything different from a business partnership strategy? So those are all components, along with, again, what is that right public funding source?
Right.
I don't believe property taxes are the best one, because it really focuses us community by community and divides us in many ways, because our communities are competing against each other for lower property taxes. I don't want to be a service that is competing against itself. And so as we look at, there's been conversations around sales tax. It would only take 1/4 cent of sales tax in order to get DART on really solid footing for years to come. Really not a big number, right? So there's other places are doing different things, and we'll continue to look at that, but we'll have to work with the legislature on what they're willing to do for us on that front too.
You mentioned Caravan, I think is what you called it. Just to, for people who don't know, is this kind of it's essentially a rideshare thing that you organize, right? So you're not actually, the service you're providing is the point-to-point organization, right? Not like you're providing a van or something.
We are providing
You're
the van.
providing the van too.
So yes, so we're providing the software and the mechanisms behind the scenes to organize people, along with collecting the bills and their fare and everything else, along with providing the fuel, the insurance, and the vehicle. Yes.
And then the driver of they would have to have like a Class D driver's license.
They don't to.
Really?
No, you don't.
That's
because
crazy.
It's still a small vehicle, less than 15. A 15-passenger van is the biggest vehicle we have. Certainly doesn't have 15 people in it. So they don't need a special license. The volunteer driver gets their fee waived. And that's, kind of how they get it. So they don't have to pay.
Waze tried to do that with like carpooling. If you're familiar with the Waze app, they kind of try. I don't know if it works. Good idea. I'm not sure if anybody utilizes it, but it's a similar model they're trying to do, or we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to know because Google kills every project the second they launch it. What's really interesting about how people move in a particular city is it's very much a data problem that you're dealing with. You can't, at least currently, there's no really good way to visualize where people are moving and what times they're going. But I imagine if we could, we would see a lot of just patterns people fall into, right? Everybody goes to this particular location at 8:52, and it happens to be that within this 16th of a mile, everyone's going to the same freaking location. Yeah. But we don't have the data to visualize that. And
we have some.
You have a little, right? But does that pose a challenge that you're always kind of feel like you're guessing?
Well, I do feel like we have some really good data to inform it. I will say there's some data people wish we had, or I wish we had, that we don't. And that is a reality. For example, the tracking a person specifically and saying, Justin got on here, he got off here, he traveled for this purpose. So some of that person-specific information we don't always have, but we are able to, and our consultants have used, you're able to use that cell phone modeling a lot to really understand where people are going. We also have informations on boardings and alightings, and alighting is where someone gets off. And so we can look at a heat map and see where most people are getting on.
Okay.
Yes. And some people will say, well, then where are they all getting off? And again, I can show you a map that shows alightings, but really where you focus it is most people, again, are making a round trip. And so if we have a lot of boardings at Dart Central Station and we have a lot of boardings at Jordan Creek Mall, we can make a guess that some of those are connected to each other, or we can make an assumption that some of those are connected to each other. So there is data we have. It's sometimes putting the pieces together and reading the same thing into it, where it would be a whole lot easier if we just knew every single person's trip and details, and to a level that, to be honest, I haven't seen any other transit agency do. There are some ways you can collect fares where you can have a tap on and tap off model. And you often see that when when I was in DC lately on the metro, right? I tap on to get on the metro and
Smart
I tap
trip
off
or whatever.
Yep. And they know how to combine those trips, and they know that information. So some of that will be things we look at in the future for technology. It is never perfect. And we'll continue to try and make the best of what we have. But there is information. We do know where the majority of people are going. We also know by that cell phone data where people are going that doesn't relate to DART.
You mentioned a lot of the threats, the business operation threats, or the operational challenges are, getting the routes right, vehicles, drivers. Not even that far out. I kind of thought it was further out. But the future of autonomy is like basically here at this point. And so whether or not the timeline, who knows what timeline is going to happen, but Google has Waymo and Tesla has Robotaxi, and both have plans to have more commuter-based options at insanely low costs because they have fewer moving parts in these EVs now, and they're going to have robot drivers essentially. So the way technology is moving, is that like a competitor to DART, or is that technology that DART is like, we could buy some of that stuff for ourselves and we could actually meet all the driver demand and maybe like break even or maybe lower our cost to the city? Like, are these things you're looking at, and is it a competitor or is it a helper?
Yeah, I think a great analogy of that is Uber, because people often wondered in the beginning, would Uber be a competitor to public transit? And one of the things we have to remember with all that technology is they have a whole lot of venture capital behind them that they aren't necessarily making money when they begin.
Very true.
They might be for profit, but they often don't make money for a while they get started. And we also continue to see, for example, with Uber, where there is a difference of goal between a business that's trying to make money and a public entity that's trying to meet that public good, and where there's a gap between the two. If someone in private can do what we do for cheaper and do it better, great. Then we don't need to be around, and we can move from there. So far, we haven't ever gotten to that point that someone can do what public transit does and make money. Autonomous vehicles, we are carefully watching. Some public transit agencies are doing pilots with autonomous vehicles. We in the Des Moines region don't have the infrastructure yet to be able to do that. Also, as a taxpayer-funded entity, I'm not a venture capitalist. I have to be really thoughtful in where we pour our money into and how we do that. And so we're waiting to see how some of the technology develops.
Yeah.
I strongly believe it's in our future. But we have a long ways to go between where we can travel on all the roads we travel on between all of our communities, have the vehicle driving itself. There's just so many components. So it is a component of the future. And I do believe it could help. Now, I do always say I value our drivers a lot. And I know sometimes our drivers will hear autonomous vehicles like, well, you're trying to put me out of a job. Some people don't understand how much of the bus driver job is, we always tell them first is safety, service, schedule. Those are the 3 S's we tell them. And some of those things are always going to be necessary, even if a robot's driving it. And so we're going to need to think about how that changes in the future, because we have the safety from a road navigation perspective. We have safety for people on the buses. We have service. We have a lot of people who need help figuring out where they're going and how. So I do believe there's a future role for autonomous, and I do think it can help us bring down costs. But as public transit is going to be on the lagging end of that, I don't see it as a solution in the next 5 years.
So it's something you're looking at. You don't have any formal plans around it yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will say, just my little tidbit as we wrap this on autonomy in robotics and automation, is that everyone jumps to the whole stealing my jobs kind of debate.
Yep.
But what they don't see is that, as you've indicated, there's already a shortage area here.
Yes.
They're in most of the areas that people think robotics are going to disrupt jobs. If you look closer, those are severe shortage areas that organizations like DART and others, in the back of their minds, are like, we're really behind as it is. We could use some of this stuff to alleviate the pressure on our human and financial capital. So I think I see autonomy as being a net gain for the country, not putting out people out of jobs thing. If you want to address anything on that with just a few seconds, that's fine. Otherwise,
well, I would agree.
I
think it is a
misrepresent you at all.
component for the future of where we go, and we will certainly be looking at it. And as I often talk about with our employees, is that the speed of change is never going to be slower than it is right now. It is only getting faster. Whether that's autonomous, whether it's other technology, whether it's zero emission vehicles, change is happening. And it is part of my responsibility to lead the organization and ensure we are changing alongside our world and making sure we're providing the best services we can. And technology and autonomous vehicles and other things are a part of that. It's the right balance and the right timing as we move forward.
Amanda Wanke, CEO of DART, thank you so much for coming in the Iowa Podcast Studio. What's the website so people can learn about all the routes and give their public feedback?
www.ridedart.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming in the Iowa Podcast Studio. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.